The date of completion of the Great Pyramid, according to the standard theory, is approximately 2560 BC. The key fact to support this date is the presence of quarry marks, graffiti-like daubs of reddish paint found on a few stones high up inside the Great Pyramid above the King's Chamber, marks that are believed to associate the Great Pyramid with the pharaoh Khufu. Khufu's dates are fairly well established and thus provide a time frame for the Great Pyramid as well. There has, however, long been some resistance to this argument. A few quarry marks have seemed much too little evidence on which to base the entire decision. Until recently, though, there was really little else on which the decision could be based. But in the 1982nd, Professor Wenke of the University of Washington led a team who performed carbon-14 dating on minute bits of charcoal found in the mortar that was used between some of the core, out-of-sight stone blocks in the Great Pyramid. Wenke's findings pushed back the dates for all of the Giza pyramids by an average of 374 years, and so placed the Great Pyramid's completion around 2900 BC, roughly at the end of the Sandhi, or transition period, at the beginning of descending Dwapara Yuga. Determining the age of the Great Pyramid is complicated by evidence that it was built in stages. It has long been known that the Great Pyramid is built over a mound rising approximately 100 feet above the level of the Giza Plateau. This has long puzzled Egyptologists. It would have been far easier to simply level the mound than to build over it. Robert Bauval, author of The Orion Mystery and the Egypt Code, suggests that the mound may have been in use as an observatory before the Great Pyramid was built. Noting that the lower courses of the Great Pyramid employ a slightly different building style, he further suggests that the first phase F, the Great Pyramid, may have been to create an observation platform equal to the height of the mound. If true, the dates of this observation platform may fall in with those of the wave of megalithic observatories built between 3400 and 2900 BC. It is also likely that the Giza Plateau was used for astronomical and sacred purposes long before the Great Pyramid was completed. Dr. Robert Schott, professor of geology at Boston University, has recently completed an analysis of the weathering of the enclosure of the Great Sphinx and of the adjoining Sphinx Temple and Valley Temple. 3. His conclusion: the oldest parts of these structures were built sometime between 7000 and 5000 BC, as long as 4000 years before the Great Pyramid was completed. Only the head of the Sphinx projects above the Giza Plateau. The body was carved out of the limestone bedrock by excavating a pit surrounding the monument that forms a three-sided enclosure. The west and south walls of the Sphinx enclosure show a pattern of erosion by running water. How could the Sphinx, residing in the desert conditions of Egypt, ever have been eroded by water? Around 12,500 BC, the Sahara entered a moist period, the Mousterian pluvial, which persisted in alternation with some drier intervals until the end of the last wet period, about 3000 BC. At this point, the arid conditions we know today set in. To have been so deeply eroded by running water, the Sphinx enclosure would have to have been excavated and the Sphinx sculpted sometime well before the end of wet period. While acknowledging some uncertainties in the assumptions involved in the estimate, Schott concludes that, to account for the depth of erosion in evidence on the sides and in the floor of the Great Sphinx enclosure, the oldest part of the enclosure would have to have been excavated between 7000 and 5000 BC. The evidence of erosion indicates that the Giza Plateau was in use well back into descending Treta Yuga. The evidence also supports Professor Wenke's carbon-14 based earlier dates for the Great Pyramid and Bauval's theory that the pyramid was built in stages. The Great Pyramid may have achieved its final form around 2900 BC, perhaps earlier, but the site itself was likely to have been in use for many millennia beforehand.